Okay, hello everyone. We are going to go ahead and get started on today's presentation. So my name is Katie Salgado. I am the primary advisor for Fulbright ETA. Very excited to have you guys here today. I am here because you probably received an email or saw a posting in one of the listservs about Fulbright and the final call for applications. So the campus deadline is coming up quickly. It is September 12th, which means if you've been thinking about Fulbright ETA, or you're not sure, you've just now heard about it and wondering how to get started, and if you want to apply, this is the presentation for you. So today's pretty simple. We have an hour to chat about Fulbright. I'm going to briefly go over the program, the eligibility, what's included in the grant, and then we're going to get down to the nitty-gritty and talk about what it looks like to put together a feasible Fulbright ETA application as well. Cool. So if you have not heard about our office or you're just now learning about us, we go by ANZA, the Office of National Scholarship Advisement, and we specialize in all things nationally funded grants. And we work from start to finish with the grant cycle. So starting with publicizing major awards, we'll manage nomination processes, coordinating, faculty committees, et cetera, et cetera. Our bread and butter is really advising applicants on these kinds of programs, right? We specialize in these. We observe national screening committees. We talk to the foundations, and we're here to advocate on your behalf, as well as provide feedback and support on your written materials for these applications as well. So everyone in our office are writing specialists as you write personal statements and statements of grant purpose. But our larger goal here is to support all your professional, personal, and academic growth as well. Just by the nature of applying to some of these programs, right, there's a lot to the process. It tends to take a little bit longer. And oftentimes the writing that we do for scholarships and fellowships are not the kind of writing that we get practice in our normal academic spheres. We're used to writing research papers or papers with a word minimum, right? A minimum of 10 pages, a minimum of 15 pages, et cetera. And it's much different when someone asks you, okay, well, why should I fund you to go abroad for a year? But please explain so in 500 words or less, right? So it's just a slightly different kind of mindset when you're applying to scholarships and fellowships such as Fulbright. And our office is here to support you and guide you through the process as well. So national scholarships are a little bit different than the kind of financial aid that you might be familiar with, or even local scholarships that you might be familiar with. All of the scholarships that we work with are competitive merit-based awards. They operate on a national or international applicant pool. They're open to undergrads, graduate students, or alumni, and the funding is always outside of ASU, right? So in the case of Fulbright, it is funded by the U.S. State Department as well as the host countries. It's a binational agreement. Fulbright itself was created in 1946, right after World War II, so it is meant to be a peacekeeping program. That first and foremost, they're interested in having ambassadors first. Their mission is to foster mutual understanding between nations, advance knowledge across communities, and improve lives around the world. So the first two countries that joined in Fulbright as host country commissions were Germany and Japan, actually, which is pretty cool. And that just goes to show, our efforts in trying to maintain diplomatic relations. We send U.S. students and scholars over to other host countries through the Fulbright program, but we also host Fulbrighters here in the U.S. from other countries as well. So actually, ASU hosts a number of Fulbrighters from around the world at our very institution through the Fulbright program. So that's kind of how it looks like in terms of the exchange aspect. ASU is a top producer in Fulbrighters. Some students are like, wow, that sounds really prestigious. I don't know if I want to apply. I don't know if I'm competitive enough, but ASU students do phenomenally well in Fulbright, right? We're a top producer of grantees. We have about 50 to 90 applicants per year and 12 to 30 winners per year as well. In order to be eligible for Fulbright, you need to be a rising senior currently planning on graduating the following spring, right? Spring 2024. A recent graduate, you can also be a graduate student or early career professionals, including artists. So the cool thing about Fulbright in our office is actually we work with a lot of alumni as well. As long as you are an ASU alumni and you're thinking about applying to Fulbright, let's say you don't want to apply this year, but you're thinking about applying next year, even after you've graduated, you can do so through our office. In fact, we encourage you to do so. Or if you'd like to reapply, if any of those scenarios also works. Applicants must also be a U.S. citizen at the time of the application. The reason for this is that Fulbright is funded by U.S. taxpayer dollars. So by nature of the funding source, they do require U.S. citizenship as a part of Fulbright. You need to have a completed bachelor's degree by the start of the grant, which is why you can be a rising senior as you apply, right? Because by the time you start your grants the following fall, ideally you will have graduated. And you just can't have a PhD at the time of the application. So that's why you can apply to Fulbright, as early as as a rising senior, as an undergrad, and then all throughout graduate school as well. You're welcome to apply. The award benefits are lengthy. It's essentially a fully funded year-long grant to live and teach abroad, right? They give you round-trip airfare, a monthly stipend on top of that, accident, sickness insurance, and other benefits depending on the host country, right? So, for example, if you wanted to take classes in your host country's language, they often also offer tuition support, language training, additional research allowance, enhancement activities, dependent allowance, and disability accommodations as well. I completed my Fulbright in 2016 to Portugal. I did a Fulbright ETA. I was teaching at a Polytechnic University there. And I can attest to the fact that they do offer a lot of different enhancement activities, especially, on Thanksgiving, we were able to go to the Capitol and do a tour of the embassy. We did Thanksgiving with the U.S. ambassador to Portugal, which was really, really cool. They had a number of educational events as well. They hosted a spelling bee where the Fulbrighters were able to be a part of that spelling bee as judges and organizers. So that's just one of many examples. They often host, 1 or 2 conferences per year, depending in your region. They do a number of enrichment activities with other ETAs, researchers, Fulbrighters from around your region, which is really, really neat. So in addition to just the amazing experience of living abroad and teaching and the kind of personal and professional growth that comes from that, you also get an amazing network of other like-minded individuals who are really interested in promoting mutual exchange from a variety of backgrounds and fields of study, which is amazing. So at this point in the competition or in the timeline, you may have heard that there's a couple of different Fulbright grants. Today, we're focusing specifically on the ETA grant, but there is a study research grant. This is just a little bit harder to pull off in the shorter timeline, given the campus deadline being September 12th. If you have any questions about the study research grant, I will happily send along some information to you. But for now, we're just going to focus on the ETA grant. They have roughly 1,200 awards each year, and it's 8 to 10 months, and around 75 countries that you can choose from. And we'll go into the country choice in a little bit as well. Okay, so the ETA criteria, they're looking for very well-rounded individuals, right? They're not just looking for teachers. Obviously, if you have teaching experience or tutoring experience, that's always an added benefit. But they have teachers in many of these host countries, right? So if they only needed people to teach the very technical aspects of the English language, they probably wouldn't need to bring someone from overseas to their host country, which is why ETA and Fulbright is very much an ambassadorial program. So ETAs, they're looking for people with very excellent verbal and written communication skills, people who are flexible, adaptable, open, anyone who's demonstrated leadership or service, and someone who has, cohesive teaching philosophy. Foreign language proficiency is dependent on the host country to which you apply, and they say very explicitly what level you would need. There are many, many countries that do not require any foreign language requirements proficiency at all, although it obviously is an added benefit if you are interested in picking up the host country language or studying the host country language while you're there. There are a lot of common misconceptions about the English Teaching Assistant Award, just because by the nature of it being like a teaching award, people say, well, what if I don't want to be a teacher as a career? Can I still apply, or does that make me less competitive? No, you do not have to need to be a teacher. In fact, many of our ETAs have other degrees. We have a lot of STEM majors, pre-med majors, pre-law who apply to be ETAs, humanities, social sciences, we get it all. The thing that they have in common, I would say, is that they have a very real reason for going to the host country. They are genuinely excited to be living there for a year. They have a very clear idea as to why. And they also have leadership or a skill set that can transfer very well into the classroom setting. Like we said, teaching is very broadly defined in Fulbright. So coaching counts, mentoring counts, being a TA counts, even if you're not working necessarily with English language learners as a TA, right? If you TA'd for one of your math or science courses, or your writing tutor, any of these things. We have a lot of CAs, RAs, just community leaders who are very good at organizing events and doing these things. All of these skill sets bode very well for ETAs because the grant itself is quite flexible. Some folks, there are two sides of the coin. Some people randomly think you have to be really well-traveled to be a Fulbrighter. And if you are, great, but that doesn't have a significant bearing on your application, in the same sense that if you've never left the United States, then you are still very competitive for Fulbright, right? Fulbright is looking for a wide range of experiences and people to send abroad. And so either side of the coin, it won't have a significant bearing on your application if you've traveled a lot or if you've never traveled at all, right? Some people say, oh, you know, for whatever reason, I've already been to Spain, so I can't apply to Spain ETA. No, right? There are a number of students who return to countries after a study abroad because they had such a good experience, and they have very real reasons for wanting to live there for an extended period of time. Again, if you've never been to the country, they're probably split 50-50 between people who have already visited the country to which they're applying for Fulbright and those who have never visited there before at all. In terms of GPA, Fulbright actually has no minimum GPA requirement. So some people think like, oh, you need to be a straight A student. No, we have a lot of students with 3.0 and above is totally fine. I would recommend anywhere from 3.4 and above would be an extra boost to the application, of course, but Fulbright is very holistic in terms of what factors of consideration they're looking into. Again, it's more about what are your motivations for being a teaching assistant? In what ways do you foresee yourself being a cultural ambassador? Are you comfortable being that adaptable, flexible, open teacher that Fulbright is looking for? And to them, that is very valuable on par with grades, right? Because grades only show part of the picture. And like I mentioned, you don't need to have a TESOL certification necessarily or want to be a teacher in order to apply, but you do need to have a very clear idea of what is the role of education and teaching and mentoring others in your field, and how does that kind of play out in your grant experience. So they're looking for those who can convey enthusiasm for teaching and cultural exchange, who have interesting talents, skills, or abilities to share, who demonstrate knowledge of the host country culture and history, and can propose compelling side projects to promote cultural exchange, right? A cool part about the ETA, this is actually one of my favorite parts of the grant. So obviously you're teaching assistant, so you would be teaching about anywhere from 20 to 30 hours per week at your school. And as part of the ETA project, they also ask you to propose a supplementary project, which also is considered a host country engagement project. So outside of your designated teaching hours, they want to know, in what ways are you going to engage in your host community, either through community service, independent study, language study, or even a combination of those three, right? The idea is that you're continuing to support cross-cultural exchange. So I've had students propose supplementary projects like starting a choir, picking up a musical instrument, starting a soccer club or a sports club if they've coached sports before. You name it. The world is your oyster. The thing about the supplementary project too, it gets about a paragraph's worth in one of your essays. So it doesn't have to be this long, drawn out explanation of what you would do. It's just to give the committee an idea of what kinds of other skills, hobbies, or talents that you have that you could potentially share with your host country. and then also connect with others as a part of that. For my pre-med and pre-law majors, I've also had a number of students propose to, for example, volunteer at different clinical settings, to work with other nonprofits. Yeah, it's a really cool opportunity as well. Okay, so the application components, which I'm sure you guys are very interested in knowing, is that the ETA application in terms of work is probably similar to that of a graduate school application, right? It's not something that you could throw together the night before. It does require a little bit of planning, but it's also not something that is unfeasible to do, over the course of 4 or 5, even 6 weeks, okay? So what's required is basic personal data. There are 2 essays for the ETA grant. There's a 1-page statement of grant purpose, which outlines your professional qualifications essentially for the ETA and your ideas for the classroom. And then the 1-page personal statement, which talks about your personal motivations for applying. As part of the ETA grant, they also ask that you have 3 recommenders, and there are evaluation forms that they have to fill out, which I will give you a quick preview of later. Depending on the country to which you apply, you may need a foreign language evaluation as well. But this is something that we can get into a little bit later. It's not terribly difficult to obtain, especially if you've already been taking foreign language classes here at ASU. Many of our professors are they know the Fulbright FLE process, and it's actually quite quick. All materials must be submitted online by September 12th at midnight. So that is our internal campus deadline. The reason why we have this earlier September 12th deadline is because this tells us that you do intend to apply through ASU. As part of the process, we also create a committee on your behalf. It's a 30-minute campus interview in which they get to meet you in person. Usually it's compiled of professors, staff, and or Fulbright alumni who are specialists in your region. So, for example, if you are applying to Greece ETA, you would be in a room full of experts with like professors who specialize in Greece, or a Fulbright alumni who has also been an ETA in Greece. And they'll be able to look at the application that you submitted for the internal deadline and provide additional feedback and support for that. And so this is actually a benefit of applying through the ASU campus process. In addition to all of the resources that ANZA provides in the one-on-one support and the group cohort advising that you would get from us advisors and writing specialists, you also get an additional committee from ASU that's volunteering their time to look at your application and give you additional feedback and support. So after that point, after your campus deadline, which is about a week or 2 after September 12th, you'll have access to your Fulbright application again. You'll make some revisions and then submit for the final October deadline. So for those who are a little confused, that's why we have this earlier ASU deadline, so we can keep track of everyone who's applying, virtual interviews, resubmit final applications right before the national deadline. So we have a couple of us who are in the office. We have actually quite a robust office, but for Fulbright ETA, we have a number of advisors who focus specifically on ETA. So obviously myself, Catherine Salgado, feel free to call me Katie. I'm the primary advisor for ETA in the office. We also have Dr. Lori Stoff, who is a faculty mentor, and Dr. Neela Bhattacharya, who is our other faculty mentor. Kai Johnson is our administrative assistant, so she helps a lot with the application portal and all of that, setting up your campus interview. She will be your best friend when it comes to scheduling things and troubleshooting your online application as well. But at any point in the Fulbright process, should you choose to join, you will be able to meet with one or all of us. We encourage you to see a number of advisors, get lots of feedback, and work with us. We're very excited to get to know you as you apply to Fulbright. We also have Dr. Kyle Mox and Dr. Mitch Habza, who are part of the office. They work primarily with study research awards, as well as the graduate awards or creative and performing arts. You will likely receive an email from Dr. Mox at some point. In fact, you might have already received an email from him saying, hey, you should apply to Fulbright, based off of your major, based off of your extracurricular activities, right? You probably have an email or two from him anyways. So you will likely receive an email from him at some point in the Fulbright process, but just know that they are also a part of our office. So if you choose to jump in head first and say, you know what, I'm going to go for Fulbright. I think it's worth it. I'd like to throw my hat in the ring as one of the options for my post-grad, my next post-grad step. We just ask that there are a few expectations, right? We really ask you to commit to the process. One, just out of respect for others' times, as well as your own. If you choose to go in on Fulbright, we are all in with you, right? We just ask that you be professional and respond to emails promptly and update advisors, because this is a very busy time. As I mentioned, we get anywhere from 50 to 90 students applying to Fulbright each year who are all starting the process at various times. And there's a lot of things going on. So we just ask that you are very proactive in your approach. And if you commit, that you really do commit. And make use of the resources. We have a ton. In addition to all the advising, we have a Canvas page as well. And, the kind of last minute work equals last minute attention. We cannot always, we don't answer or read things on weekends or at midnight. So we work normal business hours, Monday through Friday. So we just ask that, we all are on the same page in terms of professional communication. Okay, so what does it actually look like, though, to apply? So we have a 3-phase process, essentially, to apply to Fulbright. And this is all available on our booking site. So if you're interested in Fulbright, the first booking that you would make is Fulbright ETA intake, right? An intake, it's meant to be an exploratory meeting. It's over Zoom. We'll just chat. We'll get to know each other. We'll talk about your strengths and skills that can be brought into the ETA grant. We'll talk about country options. Ideally, you have a few countries kind of in mind so that we can kind of get the ball rolling. And then we'll also strategize a timeline for submission. So this is where we really talk about, like, okay, so what would it actually look like? What are my goals given school and work and all the other things that I'm juggling? Is this a good fit? Ideally, after that first meeting, your next step is to choose a country, right? The next meeting after that would be phase 2, which is getting ready to write. In this meeting, we'll meet and I'll show you how to open up an application for Fulbright and preview. Basically, I'll screen share the Fulbright application with you and we will walk through the different components. So you can just have an idea of, okay, what does it actually look like and what do I have to do to submit everything? In this, we'll also be talking about the essays in more depth, kind of what's required of the essays, discuss letters of recommendation. So who would be good options for you as a recommender? And if your country requires a foreign language evaluation, we'll also talk about foreign language requirements and what that looks like. At that phase, if you're at phase 2, then that is the jumping off point to say, you know what, I intend to apply. Let's do it. So that's when you open up an application. I'll add you to our Canvas page and you'll begin a rough draft of one of your essays, ideally the statement of grant purpose. And then phase 3 is drafting and revising. So we're going to talk about, there's a little mishap there, but phase 3 is drafting and revising, which is mainly is us in a workshop setting, going over your drafts and basically rinse and repeat until the submission process, right? This is a very collaborative, the drafting and revising sessions are very collaborative in nature. They're 45 minutes long and it's very, very quick. So the idea is that you are able to get quick revisions and you're able to get in a lot of repetitions in a very short period of time so that you can keep the process moving forward. And then of course, phase 4 is submit. You want to submit a completed preliminary application by September 12th. Again, that's the internal deadline. Your letters of recommendation also must be submitted by September 12th at that time. So imagine that ASU internal campus deadline, it's a dress rehearsal, essentially. You need to have a completed application, but know that you will have some time after that point, after your interview, to make changes as needed based off of committee feedback as well, right? So the goal, I would say everyone's a little bit different, but the objective at this point is to receive at least 3 rounds of review per essay before the campus deadline. That would be just like a general rule of thumb. I do not recommend that you are putting together a first draft essay the night before and submitting. It's been done before, of course, but I don't I don't recommend it because the more polished a draft is, when you're talking to the committee members, it's harder for them. They have to ask a lot of who, what, when, where, why questions before they can get into some of the deeper stuff. Versus if you have a very, a polished versions of your essays that make a clear case for why ETA and why you're applying, then the interview can get into more of the examples of your teaching and your ideas for the classroom, your ideas for cultural engagement, why you want to be ambassador, all of that good stuff. So choosing a country, again, this is something that we talk about in our intake meeting, but I just want to give you a quick preview for what this process looks like, right? Some major considerations for choosing a country for Fulbright, because you can only choose one country and you can only apply to one, is the candidate profile. So they will be very specific on the previous teaching experience that they're looking for, academic backgrounds, placement types, especially if you have a preference for a particular age group, a grade level, or placement such as rural or urban, and then language proficiency. So you'll notice one of the trends you'll notice too in South America, they do state, many of the countries state a preference for TESOL or education majors or advanced Spanish, and that's largely due to the actual placements. So for example, in Argentina, they largely place you in teacher training colleges. So that would be a reason why they would like someone who has a little bit of a teaching background in advanced Spanish. Other places would place you in maybe middle school or high school, which would not necessarily require you to have advanced speaking proficiency and or background in that. The most competitive countries are in Europe for ETA. So Greece, Spain, Italy, and France. That's not entirely surprising because those are very hot destinations for study abroad as well. So just be aware of, some of the countries in Western Europe tend to be highly subscribed to. Doesn't mean you can't apply, but it's just to keep in mind your options as well. And just note that ETA is only available in countries whose native host language is not English, right? So this might seem obvious, but I get this question every year. You can't do an ETA to the UK or Australia or Canada, right? Has to be in a country that's offered, one, through Fulbright, and two, that's main language is not English. Okay, so we invite you to consider regions with no foreign language requirements and sensible selection rates. South Asia, East Asia, Eastern Europe, and there are a number of new programs as well that pop up every year. There's an award search that's very helpful on the U.S. Student Program website under applicants award search. It's kind of like a quick hits guide, and you can actually see and narrow down based off of the grant type, the foreign language proficiency, and the ETA placement, what kinds of options and countries are available to you. So highly recommend, again, in this first intake meeting, this is what we do. This is what we'll go through some of these country profiles and kind of compare and contrast them. But I always like to give y'all a preview of what that actually looks like as you start considering. There's a number of favorable ETA options in Asia. For example, like Central Asia especially has selection rates as high as 56%, which is pretty awesome. And in general, it's 20% or higher, right? Language requirement is, there's none required. For Europe, there's also a number of places, particularly in Eastern Europe, that are very favorable as well. So North Macedonia, for example, Germany, Bulgaria, Kosovo, Slovak Republic, et cetera, et cetera. And we also want to highlight a few other ETA countries, some of which were on those lists, but 33% selection rate or higher, no foreign language evaluation, Papua New Guinea, North Macedonia, Mongolia, Timor-Leste, Serbia, Bosnia, Romania, Slovak, Laos, Hungary, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a lot of really interesting places to go to. Again, you don't necessarily have to have been there before in order to apply, but there are a lot of options available to you. And I always like to give a little Canvas preview. Again, you don't submit anything through Canvas, but we have a very robust site and landing page for you, including, examples of essays, resources for getting started in writing, pre-writing worksheets. We have alumni databases in case you want to reach out to any of our ASU alumni and ask them about their experience preparing to apply. We also do a training to prepare you for your campus interviews. So we'll do like a quick Zoom where you get to answer all your questions, and we get to give you some ideas of what that's going to look like. So we're here again from start to finish to help you throughout this process. We're here to also make sure that it is a very collaborative process and meaningful. All of the writing that you do for Fulbright is writing that you will be doing in graduate school for job applications. You will be asked over and over and over again after graduation, why are you applying? Why are you motivated? How does this fit in with your long-term plans? So like I mentioned, this is stuff that you don't normally get to do that often in an academic setting. And applying to Fulbright is a really amazing exercise. Our office has a lot of resources here to help you kind of get started and start thinking about your future. Obviously, we understand that Fulbright is only one of many options that you have available to you as you're looking ahead after graduation, but I strongly suggest that you consider Fulbright, because I can say as both an advisor and an alumna of the program, it really is life-changing and very meaningful as well. So I mentioned before that Fulbright does require 3 references. So it's a little bit different. It's not a letter of recommendation like the traditional narrative letter of recommendation, but it's a reference form. So your 3 recommenders will be asked to answer a series of questions, like short answer questions on your behalf. I'm just going to share those with you really quick, just so you have an idea. If you have someone, as you're reading these questions, if you have someone you're like, ooh, they would be able to answer that, that's also quite a good indicator that Fulbright ETA might be a good fit for you and that you should consider applying this year, right? Okay. So the first question is, and these are the questions that your recommenders would be answering on your behalf. Okay. So based on your observation of and experience with the applicant, comment on their ability to overcome challenges. In your view, how has this applicant demonstrated qualities associated with teaching or mentoring? Based on your observation, how might the applicant interact with students, faculty, and community members, among others, or in a different cultural environment? What kind of impression, in your view, would the applicant make as a representative of the U.S. abroad? And please comment on any other factors which you believe may have a bearing on the applicant's potential to have a successful time abroad as a Fulbright ETA. Right. So it's not a formal letter, right? Formal in the sense of like the narrative letter recommendation that's a page long that they're, writing paragraphs to. What they do is you register them on your portal and they'll receive a secure link to upload their responses. It's still kind of in letter form in a regular format, but yeah, they're given a couple of characters, about a paragraph worth to answer each of these questions. So again, it's not quite as laborious as a letter of recommendation that you might be asked, that you might see in like a graduate school application, but they are very specific. So as you're reading through these form questions, really think about, okay, who in my network, whether it's a professor, whether it's a supervisor, maybe it's an academic advisor, any sort of professional reference is up for grabs. In fact, Fulbright is very open to having a well-rounded group of recommenders as well. So these don't have to be like all 3 professors, right? Having 3 professors write you letters of recommendation might be helpful for graduate school because they can comment on your ability to tackle hard academic coursework, etc. But going to Fulbright's mission, they're looking for ambassadors. So you might have someone who supervised you in a study abroad setting. Maybe you volunteer and you have a supervisor there. We just ask that they are professional recommendations, and just make sure that they're not like family members or other students who are applying. I do know that there are some situations where there are like student leaders who may have supervised you in certain settings, but ideally these are professional recommendations, professors, supervisors, PIs, etc., who can speak to these questions. Okay, so we have a couple of quick tips. I'm actually going to go to the FAQ just so that we can clarify a few things for anyone who kind of trickled in late, right? So the common question is, when should I apply to Fulbright? So you have to have a bachelor's degree by the start of your grant, which means the earliest you can apply is as a rising senior, so this fall. So you apply this fall to go on your grant the following fall. And of course, graduate students can apply as well as alumni. Some students are like, well, I'm open to anywhere. What country should I place? So you have to look at the places first that offer ETA awards, and then look carefully at the candidate profile. Again, in that phase one in our intake, this is exactly what we do, and we'll do it in a collaborative setting so that we can really bounce ideas off of each other, so that once you choose your country, you have a very clear idea of the timeline that you want to pursue, and you're excited by the prospect of living in another host country for a year after graduation. Will I know where I will be placed before I apply? So for ETA, you will not know where you are placed before. So you can't say, oh, I'm for sure going to be in the capital. No, you have no idea. The reason for that is that they change the schools every year, and they also try and match you based off of your experience and your skill set. So that's a big part of it as well. They want to make sure to align you in a placement where you will really thrive and succeed as a part of it. In terms of references, ideally, your Fulbright references should be able to comment on your leadership, teaching, and/or ambassadorial skills. Mentors, professors, supervisors, we can give you a lot more information on this. And of course, we can talk about this in our meeting as well. This is my favorite question. And a lot of students say, how do I know when I'm done with the essays? And I say never, right? There's no such thing as a final draft, as much as we would love to think that we have it. There's only submitted drafts, right? So you will be constantly revising and reworking your essays up till the national deadline in October. The reason for that is, even though you're like, okay, this personal statement is only 1 page, single space, that's no problem, I got this in the bag. It actually requires a lot more revisions than you might think, primarily because it is only 1 page. So you are tinkering a lot with these body paragraphs, cutting out a lot of fluff, making sure that all of your writing is very concise and clear, and that the 2 essays, both the SOGP and the personal statement, are working together to really paint a composite picture of who you are as an applicant and your motivations for applying. And then submitting the application for the September 12th campus deadline is done through the Fulbright website. You'll have the Fulbright portal. You really do press submit. And you will have time after this point to keep working on your application, but just know that this will come after your campus interview. The living situation for Fulbright ETA varies by the country. Again, you don't know which city that you would be placed, but most candidate profiles will state the housing living arrangements quite explicitly. The 3 most common options are homestays, student housing, dormitory style, and apartments. Applicants who have specific accommodation needs should reach out to their commission directly. Again, we can also help you with that. And the stipend is enough to allow you to live a comfortable student lifestyle. So for example, when I was on my Fulbright grant, they had a series of apartments that were on campus that were available to visiting scholars as well as international students. So that was part of my grant. I didn't have to pay anything extra. The school, as part of their contract with Fulbright, gave me this apartment for the year, and it was good to go. So it was pretty nice. Some folks also want to know if they can bring pets, friends, or family. So pets generally are not allowed, but if you have a service animal of some sort, you will be able to talk to the Fulbright Commission about accommodations and also look into countries' international pet policy and certification. Certain countries actually do allow dependents and provide dependent allowance, which is awesome. But again, that is very specific to the host country. So we can chat about that in our intake meeting if that's something that you need to consider. Okay. So we have a lot of resources for you. The best way to make an appointment with us to get started, to do a Fulbright intake, is to go to anza.asu.edu and go to make an appointment. I'm going to throw that link into the chat. You can also find more about the Fulbright timeline at fulbright.asu.edu. That'll just take you to the specific tab for Fulbright. And we have a lot of upcoming workshops and programming and whatnot. If this presentation has piqued your interest and you go, okay, I've seen what my recommenders would potentially write. I think I have a few people in mind. I have some teaching or tutoring experience. I'm interested in going abroad after graduation. Then I highly recommend that you go to our website, make a Fulbright ETA intake so that we can chat more one-on-one, talk about some of your goals, your post-grad goals, etc. And look through the country profiles together. Again, the intake is exploratory. It doesn't require you to commit quite yet. So I recommend that you do that sooner rather than later, because then in the case that you really do say, hey, I want to apply to Fulbright, I'm really excited to do so, we can get you started quickly into the application and get those essays started and get going for the September 12th deadline. Awesome. So I'm going to pause there really quick and open up the floor for any FAQs. I'm going to check the chat to see if there's anything, but feel free to also unmute yourself if you like. If you have any questions, I'll pause there for any questions that you guys have. Happy to answer them. Yeah, Giovanna, you have a question?
Hello, I am a US citizen, but I'm not a native speaker. Can I still apply?
Yeah, if you have teaching experience and you have a country in mind, then yes, absolutely.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Mm-hmm. All righty. If there's not any other questions, I will still stick around for a little bit in case anyone would like to chat one-on-one. But if not, thank you again for joining us for this session. I really hope you consider Fulbright as an option for your postgrad. Like I said, it was an amazing experience for myself. I enjoy helping other students also apply to this. So if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them. And I look forward to working with you soon, hopefully. Have a great rest of your day and talk to you soon. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks.